without further ado, I'd like to welcome the next speakers. We have Sean Alaka at the Daily Upside, Lisa Crawford at Constellation Wealth Capital, and Stuart Katz from Lido Advisors.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to Huntington Beach. Welcome to Future Proof, the largest, sunniest, and sandiest conference in all of wealth management. And welcome to our panel. It's on winning top talent. My name's Sean. I'm executive editor at the Daily Upside. I'm thrilled today to be here to talk about what's really one of the more underrated drivers of growth for RIAs, and that's your staff, basically. Hiring and retaining top-tier talent isn't just an HR function. It's really driving revenue, it's driving growth, driving new business. So it's super important. And a somewhat alarming stat is that 10% of advisors are planning on switching firms this year. So 1 in 10 advisors, maybe one of your colleagues right now, are planning on leaving and moving to another firm. And that's compounded by a wave of retiring advisors that's going to leave the industry short about 100,000 advisors over the next decade. So competition is heating up, the advisor pool is shrinking, so it's extremely important. And basically, the cutthroat battle for that advisors is just becoming much tighter. So we're going to tackle all of those issues, and today I'm joined by 2 experts who are leading these conversations from the front line. We have Lisa Crawford, who's managing director at Constellation Wealth, and Stuart Katz at Lido Advisors. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks so much, Sean.
Thank you.
So let's get started. Lisa, maybe we can start with you. Just from a high level, we'll start the conversation on why is it so important to have a very dedicated, focused approach to hiring and retaining talent? How important is it to have that strategy in place?
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious that it's vitally important, and I love that there's always content about human capital at conferences like these, and I think this take on it is important to think about what actually is that strategy. So I think everyone can agree we need a strategy for people. It's what you spend the most amount of money on as a business owner. Maybe the next thing is technology or rent. But what actually is in that, right? So it's more than just knowing when you need to hire the next person, but it's thinking about what are we doing to then retain and develop and mentor those staff into being the most productive. How do you decide which skill set you need to bring in next? There's a lot more to the talent development piece than I think people realize, and having dedicated resources to that is going to be really critical for taking a firm to the next level.
For sure. Anything to add, Stuart?
Yeah, well, to contextualize this, when I joined Lido Advisors in 2021, we were managing about $6.7 billion in assets. We had 40 employees. We'll finish the year at about 40 billion in assets, right? So we've more than quadrupled in size in about 4.5 years, and we have 300 plus employees now. And that's not a coincidence, right? I would say that for us, being able to attract and retain talent has been the single most important initiative for our business, and it will continue to be that way going forward.
So where do we go from there? So what does that strategy kind of look like for RAs, for just advisory firms, on the ground that are understanding the need for this? Maybe they don't have the things in place. What are some of the expectations that candidates? So how do you start? How do you think about it from the ground up?
So it's a great thought about what is the candidate expecting of you, the company, because when you're hiring, you're dating them, they're dating you. You've got to make sure that it's a fit both ways. And let's be honest, not every candidate that you hire is going to be your best performer or the best candidate that you've ever hired or the best outperforming advisor that just grows like nobody's business. But we hope that we find those people. And so when we think about that, we want to make sure that we're showing them what their future could be at the company. And so when you're putting yourself out there as a firm that's hiring, you want to make sure that those folks get to see what their future might look like, so that they're not that 1 in 10 that's trying to jump to the next firm and jump to the next firm. And so what they're looking for is that growth path, that progression in their career, whether they're advisory or non-advisory, that gives them the sense that they can belong today and also maybe in 10 years. And at a firm like Lido, where you're quadrupling in size in a couple of short years, a lot changes for those people's trajectories. And they might come in as an HR person or as a tech person at a $6 billion firm. That looks very different when you're at $40 billion.
No doubt. And I would say for us, the starting point was being able to clearly define who we are culturally What is it that we're actually trying to achieve? And when we're sitting across from somebody, whether it's in an M&A context or a hiring context, being very honest about who we are and what's important to us as a business and what we're looking for in partners and staff. So, look, we're of that growth, the majority of it has been organic. And so when we're talking to people, for example, in the M&A context, it's important for us to be able to distinguish that we're actually an integrator as a firm and not an aggregator. We want to bring in people that will be part of the culture, that will be partners in the business. It's very important to us that when we bring in firms in that context, that equity is a meaningful part of it, right? As this business grows, as we grow, that people are able to participate in that together. And look, we're honest too about the business certainly looks very different now than it did 4 years ago, but I think that's an opportunity, and that's something that's important for us to articulate as well. I think oftentimes we're sitting in interviews and we're talking about what the job opportunity is, what the requirements are, what the responsibilities are, and then we often say that as they think about what their future trajectory could look like at Lido, I can represent pretty comfortably that there is going to be an opportunity that's going to exist that I can't articulate now. And if that's exciting to you, this is a really great place to be. If you want certainty and consistency and for every day to look the same, we're a terrible firm for you.
So it's like know thyself, both for the candidate and the company, but know how to tell that vision story of what you want to look like as a company 5 years from now, and as an employee, what your aspirations and goals are. And I think if both sides are able to really articulate that well, I think it helps in finding that talent and making that right fit. I think, unfortunately, we meet a lot of candidates that aren't able to articulate that and haven't really even thought about what that might look like for them. And so for a growing company, it makes it hard to want to hire those people who haven't done the work on themselves to really think about what that might look like.
Yeah, I know, well said. So maybe we can drill down a little deeper too onto in that topic on what candidates are looking for and how do you present yourself. And I know that the packages and some of the more specific things can be very specific to each candidate and each job and each firm, but how do you look at building kind of those competitive packages for your hires, or trying to retain them if they're already there and they're high earners, or just how do you look at building those packages and those incentive packages as a whole?
So I talked a little bit about the equity piece, right? That tends to be important, either equity on the front end or an opportunity to get equity, so that we're all pulling in the same direction. I think aligning compensation with the role, I mean, it's obvious, of course, but if I think of somebody who's an advisor and is joining a company where we're focused on growth, the last thing we want to do is limit their upside in any way if they have the capacity to grow. So aligning compensation with what their objectives are is really important. I think being able to actually articulate what a path of development would look like for them is critical, right? I mean, it's not just about coming to work and it's not just about the compensation, which of course is important, but really, what's the trajectory look like? And what are we going to do to support you when we're here, right? When you're here. So it's resources from a planning standpoint or a tax standpoint or an investment standpoint, people that take things off of your plate to allow you to focus on the highest and best, that's important. Is there going to be opportunity for mentorship? How are you going to interact with the other folks at the firm on a consistent basis such that you don't feel like you're being put in a corner? Being able to lay out all of those things in a very clear way and have actionable plans on each of those items is critically important.
I think the equity piece is really obvious for advisors. I think it's less obvious for operations, compliance, technology, service people, and I think it's an even bigger challenge for firms where you've got maybe less than 10 employees. And I've seen a lot of that over my years, and I've seen really great people leave non-advisory roles because they weren't offered that same path to equity or that long-term incentive plan. And I think that's a real missed opportunity for firms. I think even if you're 5 or 6 or 10 people, there's still an opportunity to think bigger picture about how you can long-term equitize non-revenue generating employees, or even create those functions in the future of your firm with folks who just don't want to be an advisor. I remember when I started my first job a long time ago, and the firm said, oh, we'll pay for you to do your CFP, we'd love for you to be an advisor with us, and I said, I could think of no worse job for me. I would be a terrible advisor, but I would love to work here. Is there something else? And I ended up leaving. I'm obviously not there, but thinking really creatively as a business of what that looks like for you and creating something that's workable and feasible financially, I think obviously is part one, but I'd love to challenge you folks, if you have great ops or service people in your business that maybe you haven't had that conversation about path to partnership with, that you start to think about what the math looks like and what that commitment might look like to see that happen in the next few years.
Yeah, obviously equity and just the financial piece is such a big part of it. And just having the room, I think, for growth and where you can see kind of the career trajectory moving forward. In terms of maybe other things that aren't as financial, are there other important pieces? I know you mentioned the CFP training, which is obviously huge, but also maybe work-life balance. How do you look at like the full picture? Are there other more creative, to your point, ways that firms are thinking about this?
Yeah, I think there's some really valuable development tools that are available to advisory firms that your custodians offer, that consultants in our space offer, where they understand the nature of the advisory business and what the talent needs to learn and develop in order to mature in their career. I'm super proud of the program we started at Pershing several years ago, and we've got a couple of graduates that are here that have gone through that. Where we're thinking about what are the broad strokes of leadership and management of an RIA that everybody who will eventually sit in the C-suite need to know, and how do we get that information in front of them. And when you're a firm of less than 500 people, you probably don't have a learning and development department, and so you need to look outside for that. And that can be really motivating and super rewarding to your young talent that feel that investment that you're making back in on them. But even just setting up mentoring or peer-to-peer mentoring or letting them come to conferences like these. I think there's a lot younger faces in the crowd today, which is really fun to see. But I've been to a lot of conferences where it's the same people all the time. It's the same C-suite people, and the younger talent hasn't had that opportunity to come and see some of the vendors and some of the experiences that you get to have. And like, what a cool thing to be able to reward somebody to come out of the office and, come see this for a couple of days.
I think what Lisa said just a minute ago about her own experience, where it's CFP training or something else, but it really wasn't what you wanted to do. What else is there here for me? I think just going through that exercise and actually being able to have that conversation to understand what is it that you want out of your career so that you can see if there's a path for that person at the firm. I think of, we have a person that runs our business in the Western United States. He's in his early 30s. He started out at the firm, second job out of college. He came to us from Morgan Stanley. And he started opening accounts and handling cash flows. And he got mentorship, and people came to learn that he wanted to be an advisor. He started as a junior advisor on the biggest book that we had at the firm at the time, moved up to a senior advisor, moved up to running that book when the person who was running that book moved into an executive role for the business, and now again supervises our advisory business in the Western United States, right? That's not an anomaly, right? It's for us, if we can identify somebody that's young and ambitious and they're learning all parts of the business and then be able to direct them where they actually have passion and a skill set that aligns, that's a huge benefit to us.
And I think there's other firms too that have created kind of the residency style programs or the advisor growth track programs that Bogart built out, where they can bring in talent with little to no experience. They don't know what a custodian is, they don't know what a 401k is, or what the difference between an IRA and a Roth is. But you can teach them that, and over the course of time, you can help solve for your gap in operational staffing or having folks doing research for you, and over time teach them the business to see where their natural talent is that wants to go, right? And again, not everyone's going to be a clear winner, but what a great opportunity for you to learn from them to learn from you, and to be able to really build out that pipeline of people that, when you're 4 times the size, can do the work.
Yeah, for sure. Like to remind everybody in the audience, if you have questions, we're going to do Q&A at the end, so there's an app, so fire away. We'll have some fun questions for both of you, put you on the spot a little bit. Please, we have about another 20 or so minutes left, so I'm also trying not to just find myself gazing over at the Pacific. I mean, it's just gorgeous up here. How about when you're talking about scaling too and growing, how do you kind of, I know culture is such a amorphous, nebulous word where it's obviously sounds great on paper, but sometimes, you have to maybe be there to feel it or understand it. How do you kind of, especially as you grow, but how do you build that culture? How do you communicate that culture? What are some of the things that actually are, if there are any kind of tangible ways to kind of to promote that or to showcase that? And then also how you, when you grow, I know you mentioned a couple times, Stuart, as your growth in the last few years, how do you kind of maintain that?
Yeah, I'd say that that's probably our biggest fear, right? That, you know, we built a business that, when I joined, I showed up, there were 40 employees. We had no CFO, we had no COO, we had no CTO, and we have all of those things now. We really liked working with each other. It was a group of people that, of course, we had interests outside of the business. We have families, we have hobbies, all of the things, but you know, you really spend most of your time that you're not spending with your family, with your colleagues, and we liked each other. So a lot of it, I mean, look, the hiring, the majority of our hiring has come from strategic M&A, where we're bringing in partner firms. So there's a tremendous, Henry Hagenbuck will be here, and you should bother him if you see him walking around. I mean, he and the team do a tremendous amount on the front end, really getting to know people, really understanding what's motivating them and making sure that it aligns with what we're trying to do and who we actually are. So just being very upfront about it. Like this is our business. We are, you know, I came from a bigger firm before being at Lido. Unfortunately, that firm had a great culture. But, you know, we talked to folks who maybe started at a wirehouse or a bank and tremendous firms with phenomenal resources, but oftentimes your biggest competitor was the team down the hall from you, right? And for us, the culture has always been collaborative. So there are examples of it. We're sharing that. And so the key is being able to articulate it up front, really getting a sense if that's what's happening on the other end. And then look, there are numbers behind it too, right? If growth is important to us and we're talking to somebody and they're not growing, well, gosh, maybe that's not the right partner for us, right? If having people all rowing in the same direction is important to us and only one person at this target firm has equity and nobody else has equity, maybe that's not culturally aligned with our business. And then once folks get here, it's, again, the idea of somebody sitting in a corner by themselves is awful, right? You're losing out on the talent and the opportunity that exists there. So for us, you know, Zoom is pretty powerful. We have weekly Zoom meetings with the different departments in the office. We have a meeting every month where the entire firm is getting together via Zoom. We get people together in person a lot. Smaller cohorts of the firm to be trained. So if you're a private client service associate, you're opening accounts, doesn't matter if you're in New York or you're in Chicago or you're in LA, you're going to get together with your folks and you're going to get training over the course of the year. The same is true at different levels throughout the firm. And so, look, as we get bigger, that's a challenge. Finding out ways to do that more effectively and consistency, it's going to be harder, but it's something that we spend a lot of time thinking about.
So one of the firms we invested in told me that every new hire at their Christmas party at the end of the year has to do karaoke. And I said, well, I will never work here.
Is that legal? I don't know.
Yeah, apparently they get away with it. And I think embracing your culture is really important too, not being afraid of this is who we are and this is what makes us really special. I think a couple of interesting things that I've seen with firms that are growing either one by one or through acquisition is, I'm afraid that this person is culturally a little bit different. Let me tell you, everybody is culturally a little bit different, and there's kind of the Venn diagram of overlap, and that's okay. I think every person that joins your firm brings new culture, and your culture evolves over time. So I've had the joy of being part of a startup the last couple of years and being able to actually define what that is. We went from 6 people 2 years ago to 20 people today, and the culture is not exactly the same. It's an evolved state of what those 6 people set it out to be when we started. And we were very intentional about that. We're also a dispersed group where we have a crew in Chicago and then everyone else is kind of all over the place. And so we lean into figuring out on how to be the Constellation way and how to really be proud of that and be very intentional about it. And whilst you say it's not really tangible, there are very tangible outcomes of firms that know what their culture is, embrace it, and really live to those values. There's data from Gallup and Forbes and all kinds of other studies around employee happiness, which leads to productivity, which leads to retention, which leads to profitability. And I can go find all the percentages because I wrote them all down when I was prepping and promptly forgot them all. But what matters is that it actually does lead to a more profitable organization, not just the big, huge Fortune 100 companies, but smaller companies too. And if you're unable to kind of articulate what that is, or even put your team if you're a smaller crew, put your team around the conference room and have everyone write down what the culture is, throw those notes in the hat and see if they all come out the same or not.
I'd love to piggyback on that just because I think when it goes right, that's the best part, right? When people aren't the same, of course, but when you get people to come in and they're additive to the business, they make you better, they make you smarter, they make you more effective. I think we brought over a team in Florida that had a gentleman on the team who had been a partner at PwC before getting into the wealth management business. They provided really sophisticated tax-type consulting advice to their entrepreneur clients. And we saw how effective it was, and we said, gosh, that's something we should roll out and do across the country. And we do. And now it's called LTAX inside of Lido. We were fortunate to bring on some partners in the Midwest, a $3.5 billion RIA where they were focused on high net worth and ultra high net worth clients, really heavy in alternatives, which we've been historically, but they were doing reporting in a way, frankly, that was better than how we're doing it. And we've changed our entire reporting system on the alternative side to match what they were doing because it's better. I think of a woman, Stacia Washington, who's from here in Southern California, who was with another firm that I won't name, but really somebody in the nonprofit world who had been on boards, who'd been managing tons of money for nonprofits, and she came over to Lido and said, you guys don't really talk about this very well, right? You're managing a lot of money for these folks. You haven't organized it in a way that's terribly effective. Let me come in and take the lead on that. And she's changed the game for us. So they're all different. They all came with different skill sets, but man, we're better because they're here.
And I think too, if you're unsure, unclear, or just want to have a fun team exercise at the end of the year, I think too, think about and go around and ask your employees, what do we reward as a business? Where do people feel appreciated or feel like they're connected with the organization? And generally speaking, those are your symptoms of culture.
Yeah, no, well said. I would say that if I had to sing karaoke at the Christmas party, I'd be fired promptly, I think. But also, something that maybe we didn't touch on, I know it wasn't in our notes on our pre-call, but we mentioned a lot about M&A so far. How big of a piece does that play in bringing on great talent? I mean, obviously we know that the numbers, you can look at all the echelon data from whoever about the red hot, M&A in the RA space, but how do you guys look at it? Is that a big strategy?
So M&A is a really effective way to acquire the talent that you're looking for. So I've worked with firms at my previous job and current job that use M&A as a way to hire the talent. Let's say they need a CTO. They'll go buy a firm that has a great CTO or a CFO, or they're looking for a tax solution and they're able to acquire that. Sometimes that's a very expensive way of solving for a need, but it might, in some senses, be easier than trying to convince someone who's a partner, who's been at this firm for 20 years, to jump ship and come join you. One of the stats I saw a couple of years ago in one of our industry studies was that 50% of hires in RIAs were coming from other RIAs. We're not helping each other out by just poaching people back and forth every other year. So I think M&A solves for that in one sense. But I would also say M&A is not a game for the faint of heart. So I wouldn't just jump into doing M&A if you need to hire people either.
Yeah, the growth over the last, so I joined in 2021. We took on a private equity partner at the time that I joined. And man, they wanted us to do M&A right away. And we probably waited about 2 years before we did it. We wanted to make sure we were staffed up appropriately. We wanted to make sure we had integration resources at the firm so that when people came over, it wouldn't be a disaster. They'd actually be happy to have moved over to Lido and that it worked and it was good for their clients and all the things. So we waited a little bit to do that. And I would say about 60+% of our growth over the last handful of years has been organic. And then the inorganic piece has complemented that. And I think that's probably what the split will look like for us. And we really like that a lot, right? Because the organic piece, if you're focused on growing, the organic piece allows you to be more selective in the inorganic piece. And so you can identify a team. Of course, you're looking at assets and profitability and all those things. But to your point, they might have a specific talent that really matches a need that you have beyond just the core underlying business. And so I think that will continue to be a meaningful part of how we add talent, certainly over the next 5+ years.
And back to your earlier comment too about the people and the good people, they want to join firms that are growing, not that are the same today as they were 10 years ago. If you're in the market for talent and your firm looks the same 5 years ago and the other firm that they're interviewing at has doubled, I could bet all day long that they're going to go to the firm that's doubled, right? They see the potential for themselves and they want that opportunity.
Yeah, and then look, we have to be careful. There's a trap there, which is to say you can get really enamored with the M&A piece, right? You can identify firms and you can just focus on acquiring EBITDA, and that's when you screw up the culture, right? If you're not careful, right? So for us, it's really trying to be thoughtful and measured and getting the right partners over. And we mean that. Of the 300 employees we have, 100 plus have equity. And that's going to continue to grow. I mean, that's an intentional part of the strategy for us going forward.
I know this is not an M&A panel, but are there any tips or ways, or how do you know as a firm when you're ready to do that, or how do you know when you identify a firm that will be a good cultural fit, or how, maybe just some tips for some of the RIAs out there that are thinking about that. When is it right, and what kind of firms, just at a high level, did you guys, any kind of missteps? Or?
We'll do a 30-second deviation on talent and talk M&A. So I would say if you're thinking about doing M&A and you really want to go out there and make that a proactive part of your business, then you should hire a banker and think about it really strategically and be really, really certain that that's what you want to do. I think there are other cheaper, easier, and less brain-damaging ways to grow your business.
Yeah, I can't speak to the aggregator model, but our model from an integration standpoint is, for us when it was appropriate, was could we clearly define how we were going to make that firm, that team, those people, their lives better when they came over to Lido. And if we weren't prepared to do that, then we weren't ready. And we weren't ready within the first couple of years after we took on the private equity partner. And now it becomes, some of it's basic blocking and tackling. Of the firms we've acquired, I can tell you that 0 of them have wanted to continue to maintain compliance responsibility. 0 of them had wanted to continue to maintain responsibility for HR, right? Those were things that they were happy to give up to us. So, right, bring them up to do things that they like to do more. Being able to offer resources from an advanced wealth planning or a tax or trust or investment standpoint that help them win more business, service their clients better, et cetera. And then because they are interested in growing, are there initiatives that we're pursuing as a business that can put, these are really talented advisors. If we could put more they're going to be business and be successful.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. So, okay, back to talent. Sorry, we took a slight detour. But maybe we could talk about, and again, if you guys have questions, please feel free to, I think you do it in the app. You can just shoot them in there. I don't think there's any in left. We have about 10 minutes, but please, we'd love to hear from you all. In terms of the pipeline and kind of where you're looking, I was actually reading about a firm that was looking for some next gen kind of talent and going to festivals just like this and places to kind of meet the next generation where they are, and just talking to a lot of folks. Where do you see the biggest opportunities in the pipeline, or where are you guys looking specifically, or just kind of how do you think about where to find this new talent?
I love that there are now over 200 universities around the United States that have CFP programs, whether as certificate programs or the traditional undergrad programs. So generally speaking, if you live in a city, then there's probably a school near you that has a CFP program. And they love to have advisors come by and spend the day. You don't have to teach a class. You don't have to get up in front of people and talk. They'll obviously love that as well. But that's a really great way in your local market to get plugged in with the next gen of talent that's not the RIA that's down the street. And I think there you'll find really thoughtful kids that are already engaged and interested in the career of financial planning or investment management or wealth management or however you describe yourselves. But the challenge there is, and the teachers will tell you this, they can teach the technical subjects all day long, and they're very, very good at it. And the programs are incredibly well run, underfunded, so I'm sure they'll take your money too. But what they can't teach you is what it looks like to be an advisor. And that's where we're losing kids from college, is they go through this 4-year program or they do the certificate course and they come out and they still have no idea what it looks like to be an advisor if they haven't had an internship or they've had a bad internship. And so go in there and just share with them what you get to do on a day-to-day basis. Tell stories about how you've helped clients and how you've had a meaningful impact on people's lives. That's what's going to get people coming from those college programs and actually into our industry and hopefully staying.
Yeah, I think that's for me, one of the more exciting parts of what we're doing, the internship program that we have, which was 4 years ago very, very informal, and now it's much more formal. I think we had 25 plus interns, and I'm probably selling it short this summer, from colleges all across the country, and they'd be assigned to a specific team after going through a pretty rigorous interview process. But then there were constant opportunities over the course of the summer for them to cycle through, meet people from different departments, see what it was like to build an investment proposal or put together a financial plan or any of the things. And the percentage of those people that are coming to work for us after they got out of college is very, very high. And then another piece that I would add, and I mean, it all sort of circles back to culture, the best people have been our employees in terms of helping us find new people, right? They understand the business, they understand how to articulate it, they're evangelical about it. It doesn't hurt that they're financially incentivized, and as opposed to us, and we're not opposed to utilizing recruiters, which we do for sure. But if an employee is able to refer somebody, then we compensate them for it. And so, yeah, it's hard, but we're trying to do all those things.
I think too, just being out and about in your local market and your network is a helpful way to build that talent pipeline. And if your firm doesn't have a list of all the awesome people that you've met over the last year or two that you just really enjoyed engaging with, maybe it was a bank teller or the manager at the Chick-fil-A or wherever they were, but you're like, hey, this person really took care of me and I had a great client experience, and I'm going to have this service opportunity open up or this junior advisory opportunity open up, and I'm going to give them a call. And use your CRM to your advantage and set recurring reminders to reach out to that next gen talent. It doesn't take very long. You probably use AI to do that for you now. But build up that talent pipeline so that the day you need to hire, you're not going cold to a recruiter or starting to do outbound calls, but you can go to your list and think, you know what, this person would be a really interesting fit for us.
Excellent, yeah. And maybe just to piggyback off of those last answers about those internships and mentorship programs, how do those kind of work? And you said maybe you had about 25, and that might have been sounding a little bit short. How do you start those? What kind of things do you need to think about when you're trying to bring on interns, mentors, or even when you have young employees trying to set them on a goal to be successful?
Yeah, I mean, creating a formal program around it certainly helps. Assigning resources to it certainly helps. So we have a person in our HR team that leads the program over the summer. We had somebody on our team. We had actually 2 interns on our team. And the amount of emails I got and reminders I got about things that we're meant to do and how we're supposed to track and conversations we're supposed to have. We're all busy doing what we do, but it got us organized around this so that I think the interns had a much more impactful experience. That's the key. And then look, we're actually allowing them to sit in on, as to Lisa's point, real things, right? You can have somebody sit in, and you ask clients for permission, of course, before you bring in somebody that's new on the team. Would you mind if we have somebody join this? And I can tell you that I maybe had one instance where somebody has said that they were uncomfortable. The opposite has been true. They've been excited to have a younger person who's excited to be there on the Zoom or in the meeting. So giving them real actionable opportunities so that, to Lisa's point, they can get a feel for what it's like to be there. And having a program that's structured in that way makes a huge impact.
And I think I love what you guys are doing, and I love that you've scaled it to 25 interns every year. I think for some firms, they're going to hear that and be like, oh my gosh, it sounds like an enormous amount of work. I have room for one, right? And you can still make a huge impact on your business with one intern. And if you're not sure what to make them do all summer or whatever time period you have them, ChatGPT will write out a really phenomenal plan for you in about 3 seconds. And then when the intern comes in, have them make it better for the next intern, and then the next intern, and record what they do and how they do it and what they learn. One of my favorite things that we used to do with our interns at our RIA, at the end of the summer, they had to give a presentation. They could pick the topic, but it had to be something financial planning or investment management related, and they had to present back to the entire organization. I do remember one intern did one on master limited partnerships. Everybody sat very stone-faced. We were not interested at the time in MLPs, and it fell absolutely flat, but it was a really good learning experience for him to maybe ask up front if this was a good topic, which he didn't do, but that's okay. We learned something, he learned something, and get the feedback from the interns too about what they really loved about their experience so that you can, again, keep iterating and making it better, and maybe one day you'll have 25 of them.
So we have about 5 minutes left. Again, if you guys have questions, please feel free, or just raise your hand. Oh, we do have some questions in here. So I guess I'll ask them. I was about to ask something. We'll take the ones from here. How about we just take the first one? Can you speak to the different ways of sharing equity with employees?
Want me to start?
Yeah, sure.
So we have sometimes when you bring someone on, that's a part of the compensation package. We have a management incentive program where we've set aside a substantial amount of the company's equity to be able to give employees equity as bonuses on an annual basis. For people at different parts of their career, there's an opportunity for people to purchase equity, and we finance it for them at a pretty favorable rate. So those are sort of the three ways the three main ways that we tend to get people equity at the firm.
Yeah, there's definitely a shorter term and a longer term perspective on that, and there's tax implications for both. And so depending on the individual or your company's risk tolerance on that, there's different ways to think about it, but certainly lots of options to equitize.
Yeah, for sure. We have a bunch of questions just came in. So if you realize you made a mistake hiring, bringing on an advisor, what does the process look like to try to remedy that, fix the problem, or let the person go?
I guess it depends on what the problem is. I've heard some horror stories, and I'd be glad to share them not on stage. But I think if they're doing something malicious that's quite harmful to your clients and to the business that you built, I'd say I'd get rid of them pretty quickly. I'd say if it's something that's more they're just underperforming, then nothing like a good PIP to get them back on track. And make sure that they're aligned with what they should be doing. I think that goes for any employee, not just an advisor.
Yeah, PIP was a phrase that I learned in the last few years. Yeah, it's the idea of being able to have an honest conversation with somebody when it's not quite going right, and oftentimes they feel it too, right? It's very rare that you're in a relationship where one person thinks it's going great and the other person thinks it's going terribly. So if you can get out in front of it, and maybe there's a solution for it, absent somebody doing some of the things that we all have great stories about, but. Yeah, if you can have an open conversation about it and then actually a path for how you're going to deal with it going forward, that's typically how we handle it.
Yeah, sometimes having those hard conversations it's difficult, but it's the only way to go. Do you have certain questions you ask to find out that you must ask if do you have certain questions you ask a candidate that you have to ask to make sure they're the right fit?
Oh, man.
So
That's
many
all right.
bad interview questions. There's a lot of really bad questions. I think my most recent trick is I upload the job description in ChatGPT and say, build me an interview with a rubric for scoring. So if I have 5 different people interviewing them, then they're scoring them on the same kind of rubric, which is helpful. But I don't think this is like one question that you have to ask. I think when you meet with people and you sit with them and you get a sense of who they are and you talk to their references, I don't know that there's like a silver bullet question.
I don't either. I was interviewed once, and the guy who interviewed me wanted to see if he could get a rise out of me, and he looked at my resume and he said, "It doesn't look like you've been successful at any one of your stops in your career. Why should I hire you?" So he made me sort of defend myself and fight for my life, which I wouldn't recommend. That wasn't pleasant, but I don't have what Lisa said. I'm just going to say what Lisa said was the right answer.
That's fair. I feel like you're the ChatGPT queen.
I do
right
like
now.
it right now.
I'm getting a lot of ChatGPT tips from you. How would you recommend a small firm attract talent when they can't compete with the packages at larger firms?
I love a good small firm. I work for a small firm, and there are people that don't want to work at 300 people organizations. And you got to find those people, and you got to be really, really comfortable with who you are and why you're choosing to be small. And if you can tell the story about why being boutique or unique is important to your employees and to your clients and still show them that growth path, then I think that helps you compete against those people. But just like your clients don't necessarily want to be one of 10,000 clients at a big firm, there's people that don't want to be one of 10,000 employees at big firms too. So I think, again, know thyself and ask the right question.
For me, it was the single most attractive part about joining Lido. I had spent a decade and had a phenomenal experience at a 60-year-old publicly traded firm that had thousands and thousands of employees around the world. And it was a great training ground, and I loved the people, et cetera. But the opportunity to have an impact and move the needle at a smaller firm was incredibly compelling, right? So I think if you can, to Lisa's point, there are those people. And if you can have those conversations and ask those questions, man, I mean, it's they're really great fits out there for that.
So we have 30 seconds. We do a quick lightning round, then we'll go. If you give one piece of advice for someone that's trying to build these talent pipelines and retain talent, what's one piece of advice you would give they could implement next week?
Yeah, I think if your people aren't advancing, then maybe look in the mirror.
Ooh.
Yeah, I mean, I would go back. That's better than what I'm going to say. But I'm going to reference what Lisa said earlier, so either way, it's on her. But I think it's actually asking people what they want their careers to look like, what's important to them. And if you can, as a starting point, do that with all of your folks, I think the outcomes are going to be substantially better.
Awesome. Well, thanks to both of you. Thanks
Thank you,
for
Sean.
all of you for being out there. See you in Miami. Take care.